The security guard's hand went up before I even reached the gate. Not a wave, a stop sign, like I was some solicitor trying to sell vacuum cleaners at a manufacturing plant I'd built with my own two hands 42 years ago. "Ma'am," he said, voice flat and rehearsed, "you're not on the access list anymore." I stared at him. Miles! I'd hired Miles myself 3 years ago after his daughter wrote me a letter explaining he'd lost his job and his wife was sick. I'd given him health insurance, paid time off, and a Christmas bonus that made him cry in my office. Now he was looking at me like I was trespassing. "Miles," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was starting to pound, "I own this company. My name is on the deed. It's on the tax documents. It's on 42 years of payroll." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable but committed. "Ma'am, I got new orders this morning. Your name was removed from the approved personnel list. I can't let you in without authorization." Behind him, through the chain-link fence and the glass doors of the main building, I could see my nephew, Caleb, sitting in my office. My leather chair turned toward the window, his feet propped up on my mahogany desk like he owned the place. He was on the phone, laughing, gesturing with his free hand like he was closing a deal. The same desk where I'd sat for 4 decades. The same office where I'd cried when my brother died last year. The same nephew I'd made vice president because family was supposed to mean something. I pulled out my phone and called the main office line. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. My voicemail, except the greeting had been changed. "You've reached Mitchell Manufacturing. Please leave a message and someone will get back to you during business hours." Someone, not me, someone. I tried Caleb's cell, straight to voicemail. I tried my assistant, Zoe, the woman who'd worked beside me for 16 years. No answer. I tried the floor manager. Nothing. It was like I'd been erased. Miles cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you don't leave, I'll have to call the police." The police. At my own business. The business I'd started in a rented warehouse with 2 sewing machines and a dream so big people laughed at me. The business that employed 43 people, most of them women like me who needed a second chance or a first opportunity. The business I'd nearly lost twice, rebuilt 3 times, and grew into something worth $2 million. I looked Miles in the eye. "You do what you have to do," I said, "but I'm not leaving until someone tells me what the hell is going on." He pulled out his radio, and I heard him call it in. Unauthorized person refusing to leave the premises. That's what I'd become. Unauthorized. 5 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, young, professional, annoyed that they'd been called for what probably looked like a grandmother causing trouble. The taller one approached me first. "Ma'am, do you have business here?" he asked. "I own this business," I said, and I pulled out my driver's license, my business card, and the property deed I kept in my car for moments exactly like this, moments I never thought would come. The officer looked at the documents, then at Miles, then back at me. "Sir," he said to Miles, "she's listed as the owner on this deed." Miles's face tightened. "I have orders from the new management." New management. Those 2 words made my blood go cold. The officer looked confused now. "Who's the new management?" Miles hesitated, then pointed through the fence. "Caleb Mitchell. He's the CEO now." The officer frowned. "And who authorized that?" "I don't know, sir," Miles said. "I just got the memo this morning." I felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not fear. Something colder, something sharper. Because if Caleb had locked me out of my own company, if he'd changed the access lists and the voicemail greetings and convinced my own security guard to turn me away, then this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan, and plans that careful don't happen overnight. "Officer," I said, voice steady, "I need to file a report. Someone has taken control of my business without my authorization, and I need it documented." The officer nodded slowly. "Ma'am, this sounds like a civil matter, but I can take a report if you believe a crime has been committed." "I do," I said, and I meant it, because Caleb hadn't just locked me out. He'd stolen something I bled for, and if he thought I was going to walk away quietly because I was 68 years old and he was young and ambitious and ruthless, then he didn't know who the hell he was dealing with. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. What would you in this scenario if you were me? Would you fight back, or would you let him have it to keep the peace? Drop your answer in the comment, because what I did next is alarming. Hit that subscribe button because this story is just getting started. I didn't go home that night. I went to my lawyer's office. Patricia Kennedy had been my attorney for 15 years, a sharp woman in her 50s who didn't waste time on pleasantries when money was involved. I called her from the parking lot outside the factory and told her what happened. She told me to come in immediately. By the time I walked into her office, she'd already pulled the corporate filings. Her face was tight when I sat down. "Grace," she said, sliding a stack of papers across her desk, "we have a problem." I looked at the top page. It was a corporate resolution dated 2 weeks ago, a resolution I'd never seen. It stated that due to my voluntary retirement and decline in health, I was stepping down as CEO and majority shareholder of Mitchell Manufacturing. My signature was at the bottom, neat and official, notarized and filed with the Secretary of State. I stared at that signature. It looked like mine. The loops were right, the slant was close, but I hadn't written it. "I didn't sign this," I said. Patricia nodded. "I know, but it's been recorded, and according to the state, it's valid." My throat tightened. Who filed it? She flipped to the next page. Caleb Mitchell, as the new CEO and majority shareholder. I felt my hands curl into fists. How is he the majority shareholder? I own 70% of the company. My brother owned 30, and when he died, his shares went to Caleb. That still leaves me in control. Patricia's jaw tightened. "Not anymore. According to this second filing, you transferred 40% of your shares to Caleb last month as a gift. Combined with his inherited 30%, he now controls 70% of the company." The room tilted. "I never transferred anything." "I believe you, but the documents say otherwise, and they're notarized by someone named Karen Poole." I didn't recognize the name. "Who is she?" Patricia typed on her laptop, then turned the screen toward me. A woman's face stared back, mid-40s, blonde hair, too much makeup, smiling in a professional headshot. She's a mobile notary, works out of a car, takes cash, and according to her Yelp reviews, she's not particular about verifying identities. My stomach turned. He paid someone to forge my signature. Patricia leaned back in a chair. "That's what it looks like, but proving it is going to be hard. The notary will claim she verified your ID. Caleb will say you signed willingly, and unless we can prove fraud, the state is going to treat these filings as legitimate." I stared at the papers, my mind racing. Caleb hadn't just locked me out, he'd erased me. He'd filed documents that made it look like I'd handed him everything willingly, like I'd retired and given him my life's work as a gift. And now he was sitting in my office, running my company, probably telling everyone I was too old and too senile to remember signing the papers. "What do I do?" I asked. Patricia's eyes hardened. "We fight. We file a fraud claim, we demand a handwriting analysis, and we get a restraining order to freeze any asset transfers until this is resolved. But Grace, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Caleb has clearly been planning this for a while, and he's not going to just hand the company back because you showed up with a lawyer." I nodded slowly. "How long will this take?" "Months, maybe longer, and it's going to cost you.
legal fees, expert witnesses, court costs. We're looking at 6 figures easily. 6 figures. Money I had because I'd been careful, because I'd saved, because I'd always planned for emergencies. But I'd never planned for this. I never imagined my own blood would try to rob me in break daylight. "Do it," I said. "File everything. I want him buried in paperwork." Patricia nodded and started typing. "I'll have the filings ready by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, do not contact Caleb. Do not go to the factory. Do not post about this on social media. Anything you say or do can be used against you." I stood to leave, but then I remembered something. "Patricia, how did he even know how to do this? Caleb barely graduated college. He's never filed corporate documents in his life." She looked up at me, and her expression told me she'd been wondering the same thing. He had help, someone who knows the system, someone who walked him through every step. My mind immediately went to one person, my former accountant, Greg, the man I'd fired 6 months ago after I found discrepancies in the books. Small things, a few thousand here and there, nothing I could prove was theft, but enough to make me uneasy. I'd let him go quietly, paid him severance, and moved on. But what if he hadn't moved on? What if he'd gone straight to Caleb and told him exactly how to take everything from me? "Find out who helped him," I said. "I want names." Patricia nodded. "I will, but Grace, promise me you'll stay calm. Don't do anything reckless." I looked her in the eye. "I'm 68 years old. I don't have time to be calm." Then I walked out of her office and got into my car. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stop fighting this. You're embarrassing yourself. Enjoy your retirement." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Patricia, and typed one sentence back. "You have no idea what's coming." Because Caleb thought he'd won. He thought locking me out and filing fake paperwork was enough. But he made one critical mistake. He underestimated me. And I was about to show him exactly what happens when you steal from a woman who's spent 42 years learning how to survive in a world that didn't want her to succeed.
I couldn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with 42 years of documents spread out in front of me like a war map. Tax returns, payroll records, corporate filings, bank statements, contracts, everything I'd kept because I learned early that paper was power and memory was a lie people used against you when it suited them. By 3 in the morning, I'd found it. The first crack in Caleb's plan. 6 months ago, right after I fired Greg, there'd been a transfer. $50,000 from the business account to a consulting firm I didn't recognize. The memo line said Strategic Planning Services. I'd asked Caleb about it at the time. He told me it was for a marketing consultant, someone who was going to help us expand into new markets. I'd been distracted, grieving my brother, and I'd let it slide. Now I pulled up the consulting firm's name, Apex Solutions, LLC. I ran it through the Secretary of State's business registry. The company had been registered 4 months ago. The registered agent was Greg Thompson, my former accountant. I sat back in my chair, feeling the cold certainty settle in my chest. Caleb and Greg had been planning this for months, maybe longer. They'd set up a fake company, funneled money out of my business, and used it to pay for the notary, the filings, and whatever else they needed to steal everything from me. I took photos of every document. Then I called Patricia, even though it was 3 in the morning. She answered on the second ring, groggy. "Grace?" "I found it," I said. "The money trail. Caleb paid Greg $50,000 through a shell company 6 months ago, right after I fired him. There was a pause. Then Patricia's voice sharpened. Send me everything, now. I sent the photos. I heard her typing on the other end of the line. This is good, she said. This is really good. If we can prove Greg helped Caleb forge those documents, we can go after both of them for conspiracy and fraud. But we need more. We need to prove Greg had access to your signature, that he knew how to replicate it, and that he had a motive. I has a motive, I said. I fired him for stealing. Did you file a police report? Patricia asked. No, I admitted. I just wanted him gone. Patricia exhaled slowly. That's going to make it harder, but not impossible. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to subpoena Greg's records, bank statements, emails, phone logs. If he communicated with Caleb about this, we'll find it. In the meantime, I need you to stay quiet. Do not confront Greg. Do not contact Caleb. Let me handle this through legal channels. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay. But I was lying, because I'd already decided I wasn't going to sit around waiting for lawyers and judges and subpoenas to maybe, possibly, eventually give me back what was mine. I was going to take it back myself. The next morning, I drove to Greg's house. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't announce myself. I just parked across the street and waited. At 8:30, he came out, carrying a briefcase and a coffee mug, looking relaxed and comfortable like he didn't have a care in the world. I watched him get into his car and drive away. Then I followed him. He didn't go to an office. He went to Starbucks, ordered a coffee, and sat down at a table in the corner with his laptop. I walked in 5 minutes later, ordered my own coffee, and sat down 2 tables away where I could see his screen. He was on email. I couldn't read the full messages, but I could see the subject lines. One of them said Phase 2 Property Transfer. Property transfer. My factory. My building. The land I'd bought 20 years ago when the neighborhood was falling apart and no one else wanted it. Caleb wasn't just stealing my company. He was planning to sell the property. I felt something inside me go ice cold. I took out my phone and pretended to scroll through social media while I took photos of Greg from across the room. Then I sent them to Patricia with a message. He's planning to sell the property. We need to move faster. Her response came back immediately. Do not approach him. I mean it, Grace. I put my phone away. Then I stood up, walked over to Greg's table, and sat down across from him. He looked up, startled. Then his face went pale. Grace, he said, voice tight, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I said, but I already know the answer. You're helping my nephew steal my company. His jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned forward. Apex Solutions, $50,000, strategic planning services. You want to try again? His face twitched. That was legitimate consulting work. For a company you registered 4 months after I fired you? A company that doesn't have a website, doesn't have any employees, and doesn't have any clients except my nephew? Try harder, Greg. He closed his laptop slowly. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove it to you. I just have to prove it to a judge, and I will. But here's what I'm curious about. How much did Caleb pay you to betray me? Was $50,000 enough? Or are you getting a cut when he sells the property? Greg's eyes flicked away. You need to leave. No, I said. You need to understand something. I built that company with my own hands. I gave you a job when no one else would hire you. I trusted you, and you repaid me by helping my nephew forge documents and steal everything I've worked for. So here's what's going to happen.
You're going to tell me exactly what you did, exactly how you did it, and exactly what Caleb is planning next, or I'm going to make sure you spend the next 10 years in prison for fraud." Greg stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed, actually laughed. "You think you can scare me? You're a 68-year-old woman with no company, no power, and no leverage. Caleb owns everything now, and there's nothing you can do about it." I stood up slowly. "We'll see." Then I walked out of the Starbucks, got into my car, and called someone I'd sworn I'd never call again, my ex-husband's brother, a man who'd spent 20 years as a private investigator before he retired, a man who knew how to find things people didn't want found. He answered on the first ring. "Grace?" "Calvin," I said, "I need your help."
Calvin showed up at my house that same afternoon. He was older now, grayer, but his eyes still had that sharp, calculating look that used to make me nervous when I was married to his brother. He sat down at my kitchen table and listened while I explained everything: the lockout, the forged documents, Greg, Caleb, the shell company, the property transfer. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "You know what you're asking me to do, right?" he said. "I'm asking you to find evidence," I said. "You're asking me to dig up dirt that your lawyer can't get through legal channels," he corrected. "And if I do that, it might not be admissible in court." "I don't care about court anymore," I said. "I care about the truth." Calvin studied me for a long moment. "You've changed." "I've been robbed," I said. "That changes a person." He nodded slowly. Then he pulled out a small notebook. "Tell me everything you know about Caleb. Where he lives, where he goes, who he talks to, who he's sleeping with, everything." I told him. Caleb lived in a condo downtown, drove a new BMW he couldn't afford on his old salary, and had a girlfriend named Simone, who worked as a real estate agent. He spent his weekends at a country club he'd just joined, playing golf with men who had money and connections. Calvin wrote it all down. And Greg lives in the suburbs, divorced, 2 kids he barely sees, likes to gamble. Calvin's eyebrows rose. "Gamble?" I said. "Online poker. I found out about it when I was reviewing the books. He'd been using the company credit card to make deposits on gambling sites. That's part of why I fired him." Calvin smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. A man with a gambling problem is a man with debts, and a man with debts is a man who'll do anything for money. "Can you use that?" I asked. "I can use everything," he said. Then he stood up. "Give me a week. I'll find out what they're hiding." "I don't have a week," I said. "Patricia says Caleb is moving fast. If he sells the property before we can stop him, I'll lose everything." Calvin looked at me. "Then I'll work faster." He left, and for the next 3 days I waited. I didn't hear from him. I didn't hear from Patricia. I didn't hear from anyone except bill collectors and employees from my own company who didn't know I'd been locked out, calling to ask questions I couldn't answer anymore. On the 4th day, Calvin called. "I need you to meet me tonight, 10 o'clock, the diner on Marshall Street." "What did you find?" I asked. "Not over the phone," he said. Then he hung up. I drove to the diner that night, heart pounding, hands steady. Calvin was already there, sitting in a booth in the back with a manila folder in front of him. I slid in across from him. "Talk," I said. He opened the folder. Inside were photos, lots of them. Caleb and Greg at a bar, Caleb and Greg at a lawyer's office, Caleb and a woman I didn't recognize, signing papers in what looked like a real estate office. "Who's the woman?" I asked.
Her name is Nicole Harris. She's a real estate developer, and 3 days ago, Caleb signed a letter of intent to sell your property for $3.2 million. My stomach dropped. $3.2 million? Cash deal, Calvin said. Closes in 30 days. She's planning to tear down your factory and build luxury condos. I stared at the photo. Caleb was smiling, shaking a hand, celebrating. There's more, Calvin said. He pulled out another set of photos. These showed Greg at a casino, not online, a real casino. And he wasn't alone. He was with a man in a suit, and they were sitting at a private table, chips stacked high in front of them. Greg owes money, Calvin said, a lot of it. $200,000 to a loan shark named Vincenzo Caruso. Vincenzo is not a patient man, and according to my sources, Greg promised him he'd have the money by the end of the month. I looked up at Calvin. He's getting paid when the property sells. Calvin nodded. Caleb promised him $400,000, enough to pay off his debts and disappear. I felt my jaw tighten. What about the notary, Karen Poole? Calvin flipped to another page. She's been doing this for years, notarizing documents without verifying identities. She's been reported 3 times, but nothing ever stuck because no one wanted to pay for a handwriting expert. She charges $500 cash for a signature, no questions asked. Can we prove she notarized my fake signature? Calvin pulled out a final document, a bank statement, Karen Poole's bank statement, and there, highlighted in yellow, was a $500 cash deposit dated the same day as my fake signature. She's sloppy, Calvin said. Deposited the cash the same day. If we cross-reference this with Caleb's ATM withdrawals, we can prove he paid her. I stared at the evidence. It was all there. The conspiracy, the fraud, the plan, everything I needed to bury them. This is enough, I said. We take this to Patricia, she takes it to the DA, and they get arrested. Calvin looked at me. Is that what you want? Justice through the system? I met his eyes. What are you suggesting? He leaned forward. I'm suggesting that Caleb and Greg are about to make a lot of money off your life's work, and if you wait for the courts, that money'll be gone before you ever see a dime. But if you move now, tonight, you can stop the sale and take back what's yours. How? I asked. Calvin smiled. He slid a piece of paper across the table, an address. Greg's gonna be at this location tomorrow night. Alone. You go there, you confront him, and you record everything he says. Get him to admit what he did. Get him to admit Caleb paid him. Get it all on tape. And then what? I asked. Then you give me the recording, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people. I took the paper. What are you gonna do to Caleb? Calvin's smile didn't reach his eyes. Nothing illegal. Just a conversation between family. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. The next night, I went to the address Calvin gave me. It was a warehouse, empty, dark. I sat in my car and waited, phone in my hand, recording app ready. At 9 o'clock, Greg pulled up. I got out of my car and walked towards him, and that's when everything changed.
Greg saw me before I reached him. He froze, hand still on his car door, eyes wide like he'd seen a ghost. Then his expression shifted from shock to anger. "Are you following me?" he demanded. "Yes," I said simply, holding my phone up where he could see it. "And I'm recording this conversation, so choose your next words carefully." His face went red. "You can't record me without my consent." "This is a one-party consent state," I said calmly.
I can record any conversation I'm part of, and right now, Greg, you and I are having a very important conversation about how you helped my nephew commit fraud." He took a step back toward his car. "I'm not talking to you." "Then talk to the police," I said, "because I have evidence. Bank records, photos of you and Caleb meeting with lawyers and developers, shell company registrations, a notary who's about to lose her license for forging my signature, and a gambling debt that's about to get you killed if you don't pay it off." Greg's hand dropped from the car door. "You've been investigating me." "I've been protecting myself," I corrected. "Something you should have thought about before you decided to steal from me." He looked around the empty parking lot like he was searching for an escape route. There wasn't one, just darkness, concrete, and the truth he'd been running from. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "The truth," I said, "all of it, on tape, right now." He laughed bitterly. "And if I don't?" I stepped closer. "Then I go to Vincent Caruso and tell him you're about to lose the $400,000 Caleb promised you, because that sale isn't going through. My lawyer's already filing an injunction to freeze all asset transfers, and when that happens, you're not getting paid, which means you're not paying off your debt, which means Vincent's going to come looking for you, and we both know what happens then." Greg's face went pale, actually pale, the kind of pale that meant I'd hit a nerve he didn't know I knew about. "You're bluffing," he said. "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Calvin had taken, Greg sitting across from Vincent Caruso at that casino, chips stacked between them, looking desperate. Greg stared at the photo, then he looked at me. "How did you—" "I have friends, good friends, friends who know how to find things, and right now, Greg, your only way out of this is to tell me everything, because if you cooperate, I might be willing to help you." "Help me?" He laughed again, sharper this time. "Why the hell would you help me?" "Because I don't want you," I said. "I want Caleb. You give me everything I need to bury him, and I'll make sure Vincent knows you're cooperating with the authorities. I'll make sure he knows you're protected. But if you stay loyal to Caleb, you're on your own. And trust me, Greg, Caleb isn't going to help you when Vincent shows up at your door." Greg stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, eyes darting between me and the darkness around us. Then his shoulders slumped. "What do you want to know?" he asked quietly. I held up my phone, recording light glowing red. "Start from the beginning. When did Caleb first approach you?" Greg exhaled slowly. 6 months ago, right after you fired me. He called me, said he wanted to talk. We met at a bar, and he told me he was tired of watching you run the company into the ground, said you were too old, too stubborn, too stuck in your ways. He said if we worked together, we could take over and turn it into something profitable." "And you believed him?" I asked. "I was angry. You fired me, accused me of stealing. I needed money, and Caleb was offering me a way to get it." "So you helped him forge documents?" Greg nodded. "He got a copy of your signature from an old contract. I took it to Karen Poole, the notary, paid her $500 cash to notarize the transfer documents without you being there. She didn't ask questions. She never does." "And the corporate resolution, the one that said I was retiring?" "Greg wrote it. Caleb signed your name. Karen notarized it. We filed it with the Secretary of State, and it went through. No one questioned it." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "What about the share transfer, the 40% you claimed I gifted to Caleb?" "Same process. Forged signature, fake notarization, filed with the state. Once that went through, Caleb had majority control." And the property sale? I asked. Greg's jaw tightened. That was Caleb's idea. He found a developer willing to pay $3.2 million for the land. The deal closes in 3 weeks. Caleb gets $2.8 million. I get $400,000 for helping him pull it off. And what happens to the employees, the 43 people who depend on that factory for their jobs? Greg looked away. Caleb doesn't care. He's shutting it down, liquidating the equipment, selling everything. I stared at him. You knew that. You knew he was going to destroy everything I built, put all those people out of work, and you helped him anyway? I needed the money, Greg said, voice rising. You don't understand. Vincent Caruso doesn't accept excuses. If I don't pay him, I'm dead, actually dead. So yes, I helped Caleb, and I'd do it again if it meant staying alive. I took a breath. Who else knows about this? Who else helped? Greg hesitated. Then he said the name I'd been dreading. Caleb's girlfriend, Simone. She's the one who connected him with the developer. She's getting a finder's fee, $200,000. Simone, the real estate agent, the woman who'd been in my nephew's life for less than a year, now profiting off my destruction. Anyone else? I asked. No. Just the 3 of us, and Karen, but she don't know the details. She just notarizes whatever we bring her. I lowered my phone. Thank you, Greg. He looked at me confused. That's it? That's it, I said. You can go. He stared at me like he didn't believe it. You're not going to turn me in? I didn't say that, I replied. I said you can go. For now. But Greg, if you warn Caleb, if you try to run, if you do anything except exactly what I tell you to do, I will make sure Vincent knows where to find you. Do you understand? He nodded quickly. What do you want me to do? Nothing, I said. Go home, keep your mouth shut, and when the police show up, you tell them everything you just told me. You cooperate fully. You take whatever deal they offer you, and maybe, just maybe, you'll survive this. Greg got into his car without another word and drove away. I stood there in the empty parking lot, my phone in my hand, recording saved. I had everything I needed. The confession, the names, the timeline, the conspiracy laid out in Greg's own words. But I didn't call Patricia, not yet, because there was one more person I needed to talk to, and this conversation wasn't going to be recorded. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to Caleb's condo. It was almost midnight when I pulled into the parking garage, but I didn't care. I'd spent 42 years being polite, being patient, being the reasonable one. That woman was gone. I took the elevator to the 8th floor and walked down the hallway to Unit 812. I could hear music inside, laughter, the sound of people who didn't have a care in the world. I knocked. 3 hard, deliberate knocks. The music stopped. Footsteps approached the door. Then Caleb's voice, annoyed. "Who is it?" "Open the door, Caleb," I said. Silence. Then the deadbolt slid back and the door opened a crack. Caleb stood there, in expensive loungewear I knew he couldn't afford, holding a glass of whiskey, looking at me like I was a problem he thought he'd already solved. "Aunt Grace," he said, voice dripping with fake concern, "what are you doing here? It's late." "We need to talk," I said. He didn't move. "About what?" "About the company you stole from me," I said. "About the documents you forged. About the property you're planning to sell. Should I go on?" His expression didn't change. I didn't steal anything. You signed those papers. You retired. This is your legacy, and I'm honoring it by taking the company to the next level." "Stop lying," I said. "I have Greg's confession. I have the bank records. I have photos of you meeting with the developer. I have everything, Caleb. And tomorrow morning I'm taking it to the police." His jaw tightened. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in." I walked inside. The condo was exactly what I expected. Modern furniture, expensive electronics, art on walls that was probably fake but looked real enough to impress people who didn't know better. And sitting on the couch, looking uncomfortable, was Simone. She stood when she saw me. "Caleb, who is this?" "My aunt," Caleb said, flatly. "The one I told you about." Simone's eyes widened slightly. Then she grabbed her purse. "I should go." "No," I said. "Stay. This involves you too." She looked at Caleb. He nodded once, and she sat back down, hands folded in her lap like a child waiting to be scolded. Caleb closed the door and turned to face me. "You can't prove anything." "I can prove everything," I said. "Greg told me how you forged my signature, how you paid Karen Poole to notarize fake documents, how you registered a shell company to funnel money, how you promised Greg $400,000 when the property sale closes. He told me everything, Caleb, and I recorded it." Caleb's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Greg's a liar. No one will believe him." "A jury will," I said, "especially when they see the bank records, the shell company filings, and the notary's journal showing she never verified my identity. You're going to prison, Caleb, and so is she." Simone gasped. "I didn't do anything illegal." I said, "You brokered a sale of stolen property. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. You're looking at 5 to 10 years. She turned to Caleb, panic in her eyes. "You said this was legal. You said she signed everything." "Shut up, Simone," Caleb snapped. But she didn't shut up. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. "I'm not going to prison for you. I'm calling my lawyer." She left. The door slammed behind her, and then it was just me and Caleb staring at each other across his overpriced living room. "You're going to regret this," he said, quietly. "No, you're going to regret underestimating me." He set his glass down on the coffee table, slow and deliberate. "You think you've won? You think taking me down changes anything? That company was dying, at Grace. You were running it into the ground with your outdated methods and your refusal to adapt. I was trying to save it. By selling it? By putting 43 people out of work? By erasing everything my brother and I built? That's not saving anything, Caleb. That's just greed. It's called business, something you never understood." I took a step closer. "Let me tell you what I understand. I understand that you're a coward who couldn't build anything on your own, so you decided to steal mine. I understand that you betrayed your own family because you thought I was too old and too weak to fight back. And I understand that you're about to lose everything because you made one critical mistake." "What mistake?" I asked. "You forgot who raised you. When your father died, who took care of you? Who paid for your college? Who gave you a job when no one else would hire you? Who trusted you?" Caleb's face tightened, but he didn't answer. "I did," I said, "and this is how you repay me, by forging my signature, by locking me out of my own company, by planning to sell everything I've worked for and walk away with millions while I'm left with nothing." "You're 68 years old," Caleb said. "You should be retired anyway, enjoying your golden years, not clinging to a company that's past its prime." I stared at him. "That company is not past its prime. It's profitable. It employs people who need those jobs. It means something, but you don't care about any of that. You just see dollar signs. And what do you see? A legacy? A monument to your ego? I see 42 years of my life, 42 years of early mornings and late nights, 42 years of fighting for every contract, every client, every employee, 42 years of proving that a woman from nothing could build something real, and you thought you could just take it because I'm old. Caleb laughed, actually laughed. You think this is about race, about gender? This is about money, Aunt Grace, and the fact that you're too stubborn to let go. I didn't respond to that. I just pulled out my phone and played the recording. Greg's voice filled the room, clear and damning. Caleb signed your name. Karen notarized it. We filed it with the Secretary of State. Caleb's face went white. I stopped the recording. Tomorrow morning, this goes to the DA, along with every piece of evidence I have. And when they arrest you, Caleb, I'm going to be there, watching, because I want to see the look on your face when you realize you destroyed your life for nothing. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me with a mix of hatred and fear. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, I stopped and looked back at him one last time. Your father would be ashamed of you. Then I walked out.
I sat in my car outside Caleb's building, hands shaking, mind racing, waiting for the sun to come up so I could end this. At 5 a.m, I called Patricia and told her everything, the recording, the evidence, the confession. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said 3 words that changed everything. We got him. By 9 o'clock, we were at the district attorney's office. Patricia had arranged an emergency meeting, and the DA himself sat across from us, listening to Greg's confession play through the speakers. When it finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, "this is one of the most clear-cut cases of fraud I've seen in 20 years. We're issuing arrest warrants for Caleb Mitchell, Greg Thompson, and Karen Poole today. We'll also be looking into Simone Harris's involvement." Relief flooded through me. What happens now? "Now, we freeze all assets related to the company," he said. "We halt the property sale, and we begin the process of returning control to you. It's going to take time, but Miss Mitchell, you're going to get your company back." I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Grace." But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because 3 hours later, Caleb did something I never saw coming. He ran. The police went to his condo to execute the arrest warrant, and he was gone. Simone, too. They'd packed their things and disappeared, leaving behind nothing but unpaid rent and a note taped to the door that said, "You'll never find me." The DA called me personally. "Ms. Mitchell, I need to inform you that Caleb Mitchell is now a fugitive. We've issued a warrant and we're working with the U.S. Marshals to locate him." "How long will that take?" I asked. "Could be days, could be months," he admitted, "but we will find him." I hung up the phone and sat in silence. Caleb was gone, running, hiding, and every day he stayed free was another day my company remained frozen, another day my employees didn't know if they had jobs, another day I didn't have control. That's when Calvin called. "I heard," he said. "I ran," I replied. "I know where he is," Calvin said. I sat up straight. "What?" "I've been tracking him," Calvin explained. "After our conversation, I put a GPS tracker on his car, just in case. He's in a motel about 200 miles south of here, paid cash for a week. He thinks he's smart. He's not." "Did you call the police?" I asked. "No, I called you first, because this is your decision, Grace. You can call the DA right now, give them the location, and let them handle it. Or what?" I asked. Calvin's voice dropped. "Or you can handle it yourself.
face to face. No lawyers, no courts, no courts. Just you and Caleb. And whatever happens, happens. I should have said no. I should have called the DA immediately, but I didn't. Give me the address. He texted it to me, and an hour later, I was in my car, driving south, hands steady on the wheel, mind clear for the first time in weeks. I found the motel just before sunset. It was a run-down place on the edge of a highway, the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Caleb's BMW was parked outside room 14. I parked next to it and walked to the door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. The door opened a crack and Caleb's face appeared, unshaven, exhausted, paranoid. "How did you find me?" he whispered. "Does it matter?" I asked. He tried to close the door, but I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was a mess. Fast food wrappers, empty bottles, clothes scattered everywhere. Simone was sitting on the bed, eyes red from crying. "Get out," Caleb said. "No," I replied. "We're going to finish this." He laughed bitterly. "There's nothing to finish. You won. You got your confession. You called the cops. Congratulations." "I didn't call them." His eyes widened. "What?" "I didn't call them," I repeated. "I wanted to talk to you first. Alone." Simone stood up. "I'm leaving." "Sit down." And my voice carried enough weight that she actually sat. I looked at Caleb. "You have two choices. You can turn yourself in right now, cooperate with the DA, and maybe get a reduced sentence, or you can keep running, and when they catch you, and they will catch you, you'll spend twice as long in prison." "I'm not going to prison," Caleb said. "Yes, you are," I replied. "The only question is, for how long?" He shook his head. "You don't understand. I can't go to prison. I'll lose everything." "You already lost everything. The company, the money, your freedom. The only thing you have left is a choice. Make the right one." Caleb stared at me for a long moment. Then he sank down on the bed next to Simone and put his head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "No, you're not. You're just sorry you got caught." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something real in his eyes. Not remorse, not regret, just exhaustion. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to tell me why. Why you did this. Why you threw everything away for money." Caleb exhaled slowly. "Because I was tired of being nobody. Tired of working for you. Tired of watching you hold on to that company like it was the only thing that mattered. I wanted something that was mine." "So you stole mine," I said. "Yes," he admitted, "and I'd do it again." I stared at him. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked, panic rising in his voice. "What I should have done from the beginning." The operator answered. 911, what's your emergency?" "I'd like to report the location of a fugitive." And I gave them the address. Caleb stood up, face red. "You can't do this." "I just did," I said. Simone started crying. Caleb started pacing. And I walked out of that motel room and got in my car. 20 minutes later, police cars surrounded the building. I watched from across the street as they led Caleb out in handcuffs, head down, defeated. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe.
6 months later, I stood in front of my factory, keys in hand, watching the sunrise paint the building gold. The courts had given it back. Every brick, every machine, every employee who'd waited, unsure if they'd still have jobs. They did, because I wasn't just reclaiming my business, I was reclaiming everything they tried to take from me. The criminal trials had been swift. Caleb pleaded guilty to fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. 12 years in federal prison. Greg took a deal,
testified against everyone and got 5 years. Karen Poole lost her notary commission and got 18 months for her role. Simone cooperated early, gave up evidence on the property scheme, and walked away with probation and a felony record that ended her real estate career permanently. But the sentencing wasn't the victory. Not really. The victory was what happened after. I walked into my factory that first morning back, and every single employee was waiting. 43 people standing in the main production area, silent, watching me approach. Zoe stepped forward, tears already streaming down her face. "We didn't think you'd come back," she whispered. "I never left," I said. Then something happened I'll never forget. They started clapping, slow at first, then louder, a standing ovation that echoed through the building I'd built with my own hands. These weren't just employees anymore. They were witnesses, people who'd seen me get locked out, erased, and written off as too old to fight, and they'd watched me take it all back. But I didn't stop there, because Caleb had taught me something valuable. If you're gonna fight, fight to win, not just to survive, to dominate. I restructured the company completely, made it employee-owned, gave every worker shares, profit sharing, decision-making power. The same people Caleb was ready to throw away became partners, and within 3 months, productivity doubled. Orders increased. We landed contracts I'd been chasing for years because word got out about what we'd survived. The media came calling. Local news first, then regional, then national. The 68-year-old CEO who took down her own nephew. They wanted the story. I gave it to them. Every detail. The forged signatures, the shell companies, the notary who sold her integrity for $500. I named names, showed documents, made sure everyone knew what happened when you underestimated a woman who'd spent 42 years learning how to survive. But the best part? The part that made every sleepless night worth it? 3 weeks after I reopened the factory, I got a letter from Caleb, handwritten some his cell. It said, "I underestimated you. That was my mistake. But you didn't just beat me, Aunt Grace. You destroyed me. I hope you're proud." I read that letter 3 times. Then I wrote back 1 sentence. I am. Because pride wasn't a sin when you'd earned it, and I'd earned every bit of mine. 6 months turned into a year. The company grew. We hired 15 more people, expanded into new markets, won an award for ethical business practices, and every single day I walked through those factory doors knowing that no one, not my nephew, not a forged signature, not a corrupt notary, not even the system designed to protect thieves over victims could take this from me again. But there was one more thing I had to do. 1 year to the day after Caleb locked me out, I held a press conference, not at the factory, at the courthouse where I'd filed my first emergency motion. Reporters packed the steps, cameras rolled, and I stood at a podium with Patricia beside me, a stack of documents in my hands. "My name is Grace Mitchell, and I'm here to announce the launch of the Mitchell Foundation for Elder Financial Protection." I explained it all. A nonprofit designed to help elderly people fight financial exploitation, free legal aid, handwriting experts, forensic accountants, everything I needed and almost couldn't afford, now available to anyone facing what I faced. "My nephew thought I was too old to fight back," I said, looking directly into the cameras. "He thought age made me weak, vulnerable, an easy target. He was wrong, and this foundation exists to make sure every person like me knows they're not alone, that age doesn't mean powerless, that family doesn't get to steal from you just because they think you won't fight." The press erupted with questions, but I only answered one. "Do you have a message for people who are being exploited by their own families?" I looked straight into the camera and said the words I wish someone had told me at the beginning. Fight back. Document everything. Trust no one. And remember, the people who underestimate you are the easiest to destroy because they never see you coming. The video went viral. 2 million views in 24 hours, then 5 million, then 10 million. My inbox flooded with messages from people across the country sharing their own stories. Aunts whose nephews had stolen their homes, grandmothers whose daughters had drained their accounts, fathers whose sons had forged powers of attorney, and I answered every single one. Because Caleb hadn't just tried to steal my company, he'd tried to steal my voice, my power, my right to exist as something more than a convenient victim, and I'd take it all back, not by being nice, not by being forgiving, but by being relentless. 2 years after the lockout, I stood in that same factory, 70 years old, surrounded by employees who weren't just workers anymore, they were family. Real family, the kind that showed up, the kind that fought for you, the kind that didn't need your signature forged to prove loyalty. And when I looked out at the production floor, machines running, orders filling, people working with purpose and pride, I realized something profound. Caleb had wanted to take everything from me, but he'd given me something instead. He'd given me proof that I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever believed. And that was a gift I'd carry for the rest of my life. So let me ask you one final question. If someone you trusted, family, friend, or business partner, betrayed you the way Caleb betrayed me, would you forgive them, or would you do exactly what I did and make sure the world knew who they really were? Drop your answer in the comments because I read every single one. And if this story taught you anything about protecting yourself, about fighting back, about refusing to be a victim just because someone decided you were easy prey, then smash that subscribe button right now. Because I have more stories. Stories about people who underestimated the wrong person. Stories about revenge that doesn't apologize. Stories about winning when everyone said you'd lose. This is Vintage Vengeance, and we're just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.